Cape Cod Broadcasting weaves the listening environments of 99.9 WQRC, Ocean 104.7, WFCC Classical 107.5, Cape Country 104, and CapeCon.com's website experience to reflect the lifestyles of the people who live, work, and play on Cape Cod. We hope that you enjoy this podcast.
Good morning. I'm Laura Reckford, and this is Sunday Journal. I'm here in the studio with Paul Nedzwicki, Executive Director of the Cape Cod Commission. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Laura. Welcome.
We're here to talk about the 208 plan, but let's take a step back and first talk about what the Cape Cod Commission is and how the Commission became involved in updating this plan, which has to do with the Cape's wastewater needs and cleaning up the Cape's estuaries. Paul, what is the Cape Cod Commission?
Well, every square inch of Massachusetts is covered by a regional planning agency, and the Cape Cod Commission is Barnstable County's regional planning agency.
And how did the Commission become involved with the 208 plan? What is the plan?
Well, 208 refers to Section 208 of the Clean Water Act. So the plan itself is a regional water quality plan. The Clean Water Act in Section 208 provides for regional planning around some of these efforts to make sure that we have the right economy of scale as it relates to solutions. Clean Water Act was passed in 1972. The federal government put a lot of money into that implementation through the 70s and early 80s. The Clean Water Act was aimed basically at pollutants that came out of pipes, and it addressed pollutants that didn't, that were just discharged to groundwater, but not as specifically. So the Clean Water Act was really useful and successful in cleaning up some of those toxic issues that we had with discharges from pipes. But we're now starting to deal with these more pervasive issues like nitrogen and phosphorus and these nutrients that are limiting factors in marine ecosystems and freshwater systems as sort of non-point sources. In 1978, there was a regional water quality management plan done for the Cape as part of that effort, but when the federal government got out of funding those efforts in the 80s, most of those efforts stopped. So that was the first and last plan for the Cape. So in January of 2013, the governor charged the Cape Cod Commission with the responsibility of updating that plan as it relates to nitrogen in particular. And so that's what we've been doing for the last 18 months and really in earnest for the last 12 months. And we filed a draft plan on June 1st of this year. We're talking with the State Department of Environmental Protection and the U.S. EPA right now. That draft 208 water quality plan will be available to the public in the first week of August. There'll be a 90-day public comment period with 4 sub-regional hearings. And then we anticipate filing the final plan this January, in January 2015.
So those hearings, obviously an opportunity for people to hear more about this plan and perhaps submit comments and become involved in how that plan is laid out. Is that right?
That's correct. Now, over the last 12 months, we've been working extensively with this stakeholder engagement group. The plan really covers 57 watersheds that we think are potentially nitrogen impaired. Those 57 watersheds comprise about 70% of the landmass of the Cape, and 2/3 of those watersheds cross town boundaries. So although there's been significant effort by most of the towns on the Cape to try to deal with this wastewater issue over the last decade, those efforts have been less than coordinated because of the regulatory process that the towns have to go through. So 208 also is taking a look at that.
And so you've touched on then what the value is for the Cape in having this plan updated where it hadn't been updated for many years because of the lack of federal funding for the update. But now that the Cape Cod Commission is taking this on as a regional entity and the importance of a regional entity handling this update is that you are looking at all of the towns with these interlocking watersheds. Is that right?
Absolutely. Of those 57 watersheds, 2/3 are shared. So in order to get a remedy that will solve the environmental problem in a cost-effective way, those communities really need to coordinate their discussions and their planning and their implementation efforts. And the existing regulatory structures, state and federal, don't really support that process currently. So we've been the 208 plan in draft recommends a number of regulatory reforms that will allow a more efficient process and one that we think will produce lower cost scenarios that are more likely to be implemented sooner rather than later.
And before we get to those regulatory suggestions, changes, the suggestions you make on those changes, tell me how much it costs to update this plan. This has been a fairly long, in-depth process for the Commission. And did you receive grants to do that?
Yeah, the state really stepped up to the plate here and associated $3 million from the Water Pollution Abatement Trust to help fund this effort. So we have an ongoing effort, and then we're reimbursed for our costs from the state up to that amount. So it's a $3 million effort over 3 years.
And among the things in the plan are suggestions on changes, regulatory changes. Tell me about those.
Well, right now, if you're a town and you want to access state money for wastewater or federal money, you're required in most instances to have a comprehensive wastewater management plan. That plan requires you to anticipate everything within your municipal borders as it relates to water quality, water management. And it results in plans that are very expensive and somewhat speculative and pushed off over a number of generations. And those kind of plans are really difficult to get approved in a town meeting process. And so what we're recommending and have already worked with the town of Falmouth on is a more expedited approach that allows us to work in targeted watersheds where there is already community consensus about a way to move forward and fix the problem.
So that's one of the changes. Now, how many towns actually have an approved comprehensive wastewater management plan? How many Cape towns have that? Well,
the towns of Falmouth, Barnstable, and Provincetown have facilities. They have wastewater treatment facilities, so they have facilities plans. But comprehensive wastewater management plans, it's really the town of Chatham that has one approved and is building and expanding their treatment capacity consistent with that. And it's also the town of Orleans that has an approved comprehensive wastewater management plan, but has been unable to get the two-thirds support in town meeting effort to fund that effort and get a shovel in the ground.
It's a long process for towns to get these plans approved, as you said, and Falmouth has been working for many years on that and sort of building consensus within the community. Many people who have moved to the Cape in recent years may think because where they last lived there were sewers everywhere, and many people might think that the Cape has sewers too, but that's actually not the case.
No, actually the opposite is the case. Where the Cape has 216,000 year-round residents, that's really less than 4% of the population of the Commonwealth. We have 20% of the on-site Title V systems, on-site wastewater disposal systems in the state. And so that right there starts to outline how expensive a sewering program for the Cape really would be.
And so when people first started talking about what is the solution on cleaning up the Cape's estuaries, and people brought out a very large number about sewering practically the entire Cape, and then partly through this 208 plan and other methods that towns are doing, we have gotten away from that idea of sewering the entire Cape and into talking about alternative solutions. Tell me about that and what the 208 plan is doing with that.
Well, that's a good description. And some of the estimates for a complete sewer solution for the Cape were $6 to $8 billion. And if we look back 25 years of the Boston Harbor Project, you had a population of 2.5 million and a similar number. So that number was completely unaffordable. So we started with the premise of having to remove a certain amount of nitrogen and really wanting to keep at least half of the people on the Cape on their existing Title V systems. And so we also constructed into the process looking at the watersheds. The watersheds are the jurisdiction of the problem. We think the most efficient solutions can be found there. We've looked at traditional approaches where we have sufficient density to support collection systems, but we are also looking at some of these natural systems, enhanced natural systems, things like eco-toilets, the use of oysters. Wellfleet, Mashpee, and Falmouth have programs going on. It's a traditional history on the Cape and an industry, but it's also potentially part of the solution to the problem. Other issues like constructed wetlands, or permeable reactive barriers. These are all part of the technology matrix that we put together that lists about 67 different technologies that we think are viable on the Cape. We've scanned them using our mapping equipment to find actual, on a parcel-based basis, where those technologies are most likely to succeed and where they may be viable.
And just as a reminder of the problem we're trying to address here, and longtime residents of the Cape, again, will know about the decline of the estuaries around the Cape. But again, people new to the area might not know about this. Can you explain that and how nitrogen affects the estuaries?
Sure. Nitrogen is a nutrient. It's discharged through wastewater systems in people's backyards. And the Title V systems were really meant to keep pathogens from drinking water, and they do a great job at that. They were never really intended to remove nitrogen. That nitrogen enters the groundwater, flows through the groundwater over a period of time anywhere between 10 to 100 years, and then it impacts, in these 57 watersheds, about 70% of landmass, it impacts an estuary and embayment. And the nutrients really feed the local process, and what happens is it feeds certain strains of algae, and then it creates an anoxic condition. And really, the marine ecosystem in some of these bays and estuaries is dying or almost dead.
So again, that's what the 208 plan and individual towns' comprehensive wastewater management plans are being put together to address. And then again, with the 208 plan, and you talked about a 90-day period of public comment, and what happens next with that plan?
We are discussing the plan with the regulators, federal and state regulators right now. We'll release that in August, and then people can come to hearings. They can take a look. They can comment online or at any of a number of forums that we'll have. We'll incorporate those comments and respond to those comments, and then we'll file that final plan in January of 2015. And at that point, I think what the communities will have as part of the 208 plan is a path forward in every watershed that does not push towards an optimal solution and leaves that choice local. But what it does is it outlines a traditional approach and what might be expected from that, and then it informs an alternative approach at the same time. And the combination of strategies and technologies really will be left to the locals. But it will happen within those parameters set in the watershed scenarios in the plan. And we've also created some new decision support tools at the Commission that should help communities answer all of the questions around these issues and move towards implementation more quickly than has been possible in the past.
Now, you talked a little bit about which towns are on their way with their comprehensive wastewater management plans, which towns have approved plans. There are other towns that need to get started on the process. What do you see happening over the coming years? Does every town absolutely have to get these plans approved? What are the issues with towns that are behind on the process?
Well, most towns are already doing some work on the issue on the Cape, and I think that's the good news. Falmouth very recently, through the 208 process, has been able to negotiate a more targeted watershed approach and got that approach funded at town meeting. So Falmouth is moving forward with efforts to remediate nitrogen. Mashpee is ready to file their plan. Harwich has their plan ready. As we said, Chatham has their plan approved and is building. Orleans, I believe, is getting ready to come forward their plan. In Eastham, they just solved the big drinking water issue, so they're willing to take a look at wastewater now. And then Wellfleet has really been a leader on sort of the natural propagation of oysters as a way to remediate water quality. Provincetown already has their facility. So most communities really are in good shape. Barnstable has had a citizens advisory committee that's been together for a number of years. It's a big town. We expect that there'll be some suggestions coming forward there. Sandwich also recently has taken some of the money that was available from some of the base cleanup and has put that into some comprehensive wastewater management planning there. So most towns are really moving in the right direction. I think what 208 does is it allows us to have this conversation in all 15 towns at the same time and to attract the interest of state and federal regulators and policymakers because of that, and to draw some of the additional resources to the Cape that we're going to need in order to fix this problem in a way that's affordable for year-round residents.
And one thing I wanted to touch on is the cost. And when we talk about Chatham putting in a big sewering program right now, other towns like Falmouth working on aquaculture to help clean up estuaries. What types of prices are we talking about? Because this is where it will affect Cape residents in their pocketbooks. When we talk about cleaning up estuaries in a town through different methods and sewering, what type of price tags are we talking about for individual towns?
Well, in the 208 plan, we really try to have the discussion comprehensively. So we're looking at sort of cost and financial issues, we're looking at environmental issues, and we're looking at economic issues too. Through the cost perspective, which I think really is the issue that drives the bottom line, we're talking at much lower numbers now, but the cost of a particular engineering solution or a particular strategy will differ from watershed to watershed based on what the nature of the problem, but also the nature of the community. In certain areas where there's sufficient density, some more traditional approaches are going to be the least costly, especially if they're proximate to existing facilities. In other areas that are more rural, areas that have more natural harbors, have a history of aquaculture, other approaches like aquaculture may be much less expensive. So it really will depend, and what we're trying to do are to build the tools that will allow you to come up with the most effective, lowest cost option, which in most communities is going to be a mix of different strategies.
And we're talking about it will be millions of dollars, whatever it is, depending on the different solutions. But certainly when we talk about sewering, we're talking about very big price tags. Big price tags. Price tags for most communities that are for traditional sewering that are in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And we've been talking about the 208 plan that will help to guide towns as they work to clean up their estuaries from nitrogen pollution on Cape Cod. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I've been talking to Paul Niedzwiecki, Executive Director of the Cape Cod Commission. Paul, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
I'm Laura Reckford, and this is Sunday Journal.
This podcast is a presentation of Cape Cod Broadcasting, which is solely responsible for its content. Thank you for listening. For more information, please visit us at capecodbroadcasting.com.